Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Narset Enlightened Master. So Narset Enlightened Master is a 6-mana Jeskai creature, 3/2 first strike hexproof, and it says whenever it attacks, exile the top 4 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may cast non-creature spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. So the primary thing that you're going to be doing with Narset is you're going to want to, of course, ramp into it as fast as possible. Give it haste, so your opponent have the least amount of time to get rid of it. It does have hexproof, but it still gets hit by all kinds of sweepers like Cyclonic Rift and whatnot. And then you're going to want to fill your deck with essentially combo cards, either extra turn spells or extra combat spells that will allow you to continuously keep attacking with Narset over and over and over without giving your opponents an opportunity to respond. So before we get into that, quickly to go through the rest of it, we've of course got our card draw. Sentinel, Mystic Remora, Ristic Study. Lorien Revealed's particularly good in this deck because it's either a land on one side or a draw 3 for free on the other with Narset. We've got our counter spells, of course. Now, the counter spells are less valuable in this deck because we don't ever want to hit them with Narset since casting them is irrelevant for the most part. It's kind of relevant in that it protects our other spells, but if we're already attacking with Narset unencumbered, we're probably in a pretty good position anyway. Then I'll skip this for now. Then we've got, of course, our fast mana. So Spirit Guide, Rite of Flame, Reckless Barbarian, Lotus Petal, Jeweled Lotus, Jessica's Will. Generator Servant is particularly useful because if you cast a creature with its mana, then the creature gets haste, which is very relevant for Narset. We could potentially play other mana ramp like Seething Song and Blank Goblin, but that doesn't fix the white and blue mana in Narset's cost. But I don't know, maybe testing will show that those are good as well. But for right now, these guys, we want as much haste as possible because we never want to cast Narset and then have to ship the turn. Our opponents are going to basically know what's up and are going to do their damnedest to kill Narset immediately. So we always want to be able to just attack with her as fast as possible. So as mentioned, Generator Servant, Lightning Greaves in here, Mass Hysteria, Hall of Bandit Lord, Ashling's Prerogative, and Need for Speed, sack a land, target creature gains haste. We could also play Torch Courier in this spot, but it's a creature that's susceptible to removal. I don't know, maybe it's fine. There's other haste cards that we could play. Then a bunch of lands, obviously including Hall of the Bandit Lord. Protection spells, so we don't want Narset to get countered, so the Grand Abolisher, Silence, Teferi, Deflecting Swat, Defense Grid, Cavern, so she gets through counter spells. As mentioned with some other decks, Teferi has a bit of a downside in that if one of your opponents tries to combo off and you don't have an answer to their combo, but one of your opponents does, if Teferi's in play, it also stops them from interacting. So it doesn't just protect you, it protects everybody from instant speed interaction, aside from your instant speed interaction. So you do have to be careful with Teferi. Then we want, again, as much ramp as we can get to get Narset out as fast as possible, potentially even more ramp than this, but this is like the best ramp we could play. Although there's plenty of 2-mana rocks not shown here that could be, relevant cards as well. Cards that we previously mentioned also double as removal. Relic hits graveyards, but it's also relevant for one other thing that we'll get to later, Cyclonic Rift, some tutors. Omniscience is just a good card to hit off of Narset, so that's why this is in here. Brainstorm is also in here in case we draw any of our big expensive spells. We can brainstorm them back to the top so that Narset can cast them. And then I debated on a number of different win conditions for this deck. So obviously we're taking a bunch of extra turns and we're taking a bunch of extra combats, but how do you actually win the game? Like, I guess potentially you could attack everyone to death with Narset, but at only 3 damage per attack, that's not necessarily going to kill everyone before we run out of extra turns. I did want one way of being able to actually just straight up win the game. We could have played Thoracle or like Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, but I think the cleanest one is just Approach of the Second Sun. It's a spell that we can hit off of Narset, we cast it, and then we can easily get to it in the next 1 to 2 attacks because it goes back onto the top 7th card of our deck. So it'll be fairly easy to just find it again and win. So then, of course, we got to talk about the extra turn and extra combat steps. So extra turn / extra combat spells are going to be the ones that we want to find off of Narset. And we do need a fairly substantial amount of them so that we have a good shot of hitting at least one in the top 4 cards off of Narset. So these are going to be fairly straightforward. Extra turn spells mean we get to just take another turn and attack with Narset again. Extra combat spells mean we get to attack with Narset again. So Alrund's Epiphany, extra turn, Beacon of Tomorrow's extra turn, Capture of Jingzhou. Expropriate is one of the best ones. It allows us to take at least 1 extra turn and potentially steal things from our opponent. Fury of the Horde, extra turn. Karn's Temporal Sundering, extra turn plus we get to bounce something if there's something relevant that we need to bounce. Nexus of Fate, Part the Water Veil. Notably, we can't cast the Awaken part of it for free. So we don't get the 6/6 land unless we pay the full 9. Relentless Assault, extra combat. Rise of the Eldrazi is both an extra turn spell that's also uncounterable and destroys a permanent and draws 4 cards. Savage Beating, extra combat. Also gives Narset potentially double strike if you want to do that as well, if you have multiple other extra combat step things or turn spells, but then it'll run out. Seize the Day has flashback, so this alone can give us another extra combat in case we brick. Temporal Manipulation, turn. Temporal Mastery, extra turn. Temporal Trespass, extra turn. Time Stretch, 2 extra turns. Time Warp, Walk the Aeons. We can maybe buy this back, although it's a pretty steep cost to sack 3 islands to do so. Waves of Aggression, again, extra turn, and it has Retrace, so we can discard lands to retrace it again. And World at War has Rebound and is an extra combat step. So 20 of the cards in the deck are extra turn / extra combat spells, which gives us a fairly decent shot of hitting any one of them in the top 4. And of course, if we ever hit multiple of them, then we're taking multiple extra turns or combats. Then, lastly, we've got combo cards. So Mind's Desire, if we're casting a bunch of extra spells off of Narset already, even if we just find a few spells off of Narset, we can potentially get some Storm stuff going with Mind's Desire. And then the last one is the combo of Mirror of Fate, and then anything that can continuously exile stuff from the graveyard. So Relic of Progenitus or Scrabbling Claws, like any of those cards will do. So what does this card do? Mirror of Fate is a 5 mana artifact, and it says tap, sack it, choose up to 7 face-up cards exiled with it that you own, or exiled that you own. Exile all cards from your library, and then put the chosen cards on top of your library. So Narset is obviously exiling spells, which means that with Mirror of Fate, you can sack it and put those cards back onto the top of your library. Now, it itself doesn't get exiled, it sacks itself, but if you have a card like Relic of Progenitus, Scrabbling Claws, etc., you can just exile the Mirror of Fate. So you go activate Mirror of Fate, hold priority, so now it's in your graveyard because you sacked it, activate Relic or Scrabbling Claws or whatever to exile it out of your graveyard. Now, it is among the cards that you have exiled, so you can put it along with anything else that you have in exile back into your library. Then, as long as any of those spells that you're exiling are extra combat or extra turn spells, you can then attack with Narset again, exile the top 4, including Mirror of Fate. You recast Mirror of Fate, you recast the extra turn spell, etc., and you go again. Over and over and over, taking infinite turns or infinite combat steps to win the game. If for whatever reason you also need to get rid of Relic, Relic can exile itself. So you can just keep doing this over and over and over, getting infinite turns / combat steps with Narset, always getting Mirror of Fate back, always getting back the other spells. And that is Narset. So again, primarily what you're going to want to do is play as much ramp as fast as possible, including fast mana, because it doesn't matter how much mana you have as long as you can get Narset in play. You're primarily going to want to have a way to protect it, so from counter spells like with Cavern of Souls or Silence or whatnot. You're also going to want a way to give it haste immediately so that you don't have to wait a turn before you can attack with it, so you're not susceptible to sweepers. And then you're going to hopefully not brick, and with 20 of the cards in the deck being extra turn or extra combat spells, you probably won't brick, although you could, so there is always that risk. But you have a pretty good shot of hitting at least one of these out of the top 4. Then you take infinite combat steps or infinite turns. I mean, not exactly infinite unless you have this exact combo, but infinite or pseudo-infinite extra combats or turns, and then you kill your opponent either by just attacking them to death with Narset, / another creature like Awakening Part the Water Veil, or you just win straight up with a win the game card like Approach of the Second Sun. Or if you're not all about this card specifically, you could also win with Jace Wielder of Mysteries, Labman, or Thoracle. And that is Narset Enlightened Master.